backwards to go forward. My dad preached last week from Matthew chapter number 5 and verse number 9. He said, "Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called the children of God. Blessed are they which are persecuted for righteousness' sake, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are ye when men shall revile you and persecute you, and shall say all manner of evil against you falsely for my sake. Rejoice and be exceeding glad, for great is your reward in heaven. For so persecuted they the prophets which were before you." If you've been around here for any length of time, you know that we're walking through verse by verse the entire Gospel of Matthew. And for the last 8, and I think this is the 9th week, we have been focusing in on the Sermon on the Mount, Matthew 5, 6, and 7, but then even narrowing it down further to the first introduction to the Sermon on the Mount, which is what we call the Beatitudes. Its source is from the Latin word beatus, which simply means, which is the word blessed, which we have defined from the Hebrew word azre and the Greek word makarios, kind of to be the fortunate life. This is what we perceive when we see somebody else and we say, oh man, that person has the good life. That person has the blessed life. And yet Jesus is speaking to an audience that doesn't seem, from the world's perspective, very blessed. They are the outcasts of society. They are the ones that even the Jews didn't want a part of the congregation there. They were the ones that were beaten down and bruised underneath the Roman tyranny of the time. And this is Jesus speaking on that mountain as this group of followers is desiring to hear from this new rabbi Jesus. And Jesus begins to declare unto them the gospel of the kingdom, the good news that has come for these outcast individuals and for any who are willing to step into the kingdom. So last week we looked, and my dad spoke and very truthfully spoke about the difference between being a peacemaker versus a peacekeeper. There's a very clear differentiation between the two. A peacekeeper is one who simply doesn't want to cause conflict or doesn't want to enter into conflict of any kind. They just kind of keep the peace. It's like, oh, no, I'm sorry, I won't say anything that offends you or anything like that. I'm just trying to keep the peace. And oftentimes that type of person, and I am that type of person, that person just kind of submerges their true feelings, their honest thoughts, and then it ends up in an explosion, which is Savannah knows, okay? And it's a bad thing to just shove the feelings or emotions and then explode. Rather, we are called to take the step towards what Jesus calls being a peacemaker. One who is willing to step into conflict, but not enter it with anger and hatred and angst, but rather with love, with gentleness, kindness, grace, and the wisdom of God. And so we're called to be peacemakers. Everyone wants peace. Like I said, I'm taking a half step backwards to go forward. Everyone wants peace. Everyone in Jesus' day wanted peace. If we look around the world today, everyone is calling for some type of peace in our world. I think all you have to do is turn on the news and see that we are in desperate need of peace in our world. But everybody is trying to accomplish peace in a myriad of ways. Just like Jesus' audience was also trying to accomplish peace in the myriad of ways that they wanted to or desired to. Some wanted control. Some wanted comfort. Some wanted to escape. And some wanted victory. And if we're honest, we do the same thing today. When you think of, we need peace, what does that mean for you? I think if we were to ask that question amongst us this morning, all of us would have our own version of what peace looks like. The question is not, do you want peace? The question is, what kind of peace are you pursuing? You see here in Matthew 5, verses 9 through 12, we are looking at this framework of blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called the children of God. And then it continues into verse number 10, right? So we're called to be peacemakers, but then the thought leads right into verse number 10, which says, blessed are they which are persecuted for righteousness' sake, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Hold on, I don't really understand what's going on here. So we're called to make peace, we're called to be peacemakers, and then all of a sudden there seems to be a conflict of some kind that ends with me being persecuted, being despised. Continue the thought there, verse number 11, blessed are ye when men shall revile you and persecute you, and shall say all manner of evil against you falsely for my sake. Rejoice and be exceeding glad, for great is your reward in heaven. Blessed are the peacemakers. So this is one continuous idea, one continuous thought. So there are false versions of peace that exist in our world today. And it existed in the world that Jesus was part of at that time. Jesus' audience would have heard the word peacemaker, but they would have all heard it through a different lens than what Jesus had intended. You see, there were different groups. We'll look at 4 groups briefly this morning that Jesus was speaking to. It says that there was a crowd that gathered from Jerusalem, that would have been the capital city of the nation of Israel at that time, and from Galilee, and from Decapolis, and even some came from Syria, non-Jews. All are on the same mountain here as Jesus is making this declaration of the kingdom. So we have the Pharisees, okay? We kind of have a glimpse or a little bit of an understanding of the word Pharisee, and we definitely have a negative connotation to the word Pharisee, right? When we use that in our language today, we're like, no. But the Pharisees, it's in pure intention, their desire was to keep the law of God, the Old Testament law of God, or what the Hebrews call the Torah, okay? They were a highly influential religious movement, excuse me, made up of lay teachers and also experts in the law. They were deeply committed to interpreting and applying the Torah to everyday life, and they were respected by the common people. They were looked up to by the common people, the common Jew. The Pharisees were those who were trying to pursue God. They were trying to live according to the law, according to the Torah. Yet, we know that Jesus would often confront the Pharisees, correct? They were the religious of the time. They would have been, quote unquote, the church of the time. They were the Bible scholars, the Bible nerds, those who understood and knew the scriptures. And so the lay people, the common Jew, had a great respect for this group. However, when they heard Jesus say, blessed are the peacemakers, they would have understood it possibly in this way. Their view of peace was peace comes through strict obedience. Peace comes if everyone follows the law. Everyone that God blesses is one who is following the law of God. And that provides peace and that provides stability for everyone. So the Pharisees had done is said, hey, everybody needs to accomplish the law of God. And beyond that, we're going to add more laws to the law of God so that everybody can maintain peace with God. We're going to have laws upon laws upon laws so we make sure we keep the law of God. So sadly, their form of peace had turned into oppression of the people. So the Pharisees, when they heard peacemaker, they're like, yeah, that's what I'm about. Peace is about keeping God's law. And laws upon laws upon laws. Then you have the Sadducees. The Pharisees, they were the highly influential religious movement. They had this form of peace that they understood. But the problem with the Pharisees' form of peace is you can control behavior without changing hearts. And then peace becomes legalism. It's kind of a hot word, but that's the truth. Peace for the Pharisee was, hey, legalism. Everybody needs to abide by the law and the laws that we've added so that we can maintain peace. The Sadducees were peace through compromise. So the Pharisees were peace through control. The Sadducees were peace through compromise. Here's who they were. They were an elite priestly group that was connected to the temple in Jerusalem. They were the ones that had a lot of the authority in the capital city of Jerusalem. And they held political power and also worked closely with the Roman government and authorities to maintain their position. So this was this blend of government and church, quote unquote. But the people, the religious groups, and the government were closely connected, were closely tied together. And their view of peace was that they just wanted to keep Rome satisfied. They wanted to do everything within their power to make sure that Rome looked kindly at their group. So when they heard the term, blessed are the peacemakers, they had in their mind, well, let's just make sure that Rome is satisfied. Let's make sure that we don't have any type of unrest. We avoid any type of conflict, and we got to stomp out any form of rebellion or anything that opposes Rome, so therefore we can maintain our high seats of power. They wanted to maintain power and order. Here's the problem with that view of being a peacemaker. Peace becomes appeasement. Well, let's just appease the authorities above us, and therefore we'll maintain peace. I mean, it was very unsuccessful if you look at the chaos that was ensuing during this time. There's a third group, the Essenes. They were a group that were all about peace through withdrawal. So when they heard Jesus say, blessed are the peacemakers, they said, yeah, we're about peace as well. But the way that we maintain peace is that we will become separate communities. These were like, they were a little cult-like, okay? So they would move into smaller communities in the desert areas. In fact, they were the owners of the Dead Sea Scrolls that were just discovered in the last 100 years. They were the ones that had kept all of those documents, and it was in their settlements that were all of those came out of. And so they withdrew from mainstream society. They said everything is wrong about our world. Everything is chaos. Everything is sinful. Everything is horrible. So let's just move to the mountain. Let's move to the wilderness areas. Let's form our little groups out there. And therefore, we maintain peace by not even entering into anything that's going on. Right? They keep themselves separate. Are you beginning to just process this a little bit in yourself? You're like, man, I kind of related to that, or I kind of related to that. That's kind of the point of what this teaching is and preaching is that it should resonate with us just a little bit. Oh, wow, my heart kind of leans in that direction. I'm one that kind of avoids peace, so I just kind of run to the wilderness of my heart and my mind. Or I'm one that wants control. I want to maintain peace in my house and my relationship, so I gain it by control. I'm the appeaser. I'm just like, I don't want to. Their view of peace was, well, we got to be separate from corruption. We got to preserve holiness. We got to wait for God to act. The problem with this is then peace becomes isolation. You avoid the brokenness instead of entering into it. We isolate. This is why even as a parent, we homeschool our children. But the danger of what we've decided to do of keeping our children at home and educating them at home is that they become isolated. I don't want my children to become isolated. I want them to become insulated so that they can be in the world but not of the world. They can be ready to face the world, yet they're not isolated from the world. And here's what happens. You isolate, and then you're exposed. You're like, I don't even know. The child's like, I don't even know what to do with the world. There's so many thoughts and viewpoints, and this is valid, and this is valid, and this is valid. And they become confused. There's a lot of chaos in their soul and their hearts and their minds, and that's not what I'm about. I'm not about indoctrinating my children. I'm about allowing them to be exposed to the world and say, here, you see that? That's not the heart of Jesus. This is the heart of Jesus. It's one of compassion, of love, of grace, and kindness. You see what's happening in the world? This is what Jesus calls us to. And then that plays out in everyday life because they have conflict. I don't know if you realize that. I have conflict. Okay, so you have this third group. They wanted peace through isolation. They wanted to avoid the brokenness instead of entering it. Fourth group, and last, these are the zealots. These are those who wanted peace through force. We're going to get peace. And we're going to get it through violence. They were the ones who were the revolutionary movement of Jewish nationalists. They were those who were committed to overthrowing the Roman rule. They didn't like the tyranny of the Romans. Nobody did. And yet they were the ones that would say, well, I'm brave enough to stand up against the tyranny that is taking place. And they grabbed the sword. They often, through violent resistance, and you can look back at specifically the Maccabean revolt, which happened before Jesus' time. It was an immense rebellion that took place with this zealot group, and a lot of chaos ensued, a lot of blood was spilled, a lot of violence. Their view of peace was that we must gain freedom through a revolt, through a rebellion. We must establish God's kingdom by force. We're not going to have these Romans breathing down our necks with their taxes and all that they're doing to us. The problem with this is that you can win a war and still not have peace. Peace becomes destruction in this form. It is actually the opposite of peace. Now, all of us are like going through our minds, like there's thoughts and process going, well, what about this? What about this? I can't nail that down for every single one of us this morning. What I can do is ask ourselves the question, what is your view of peace? And does it align with Jesus' view of peace? The summary of these false pieces is that there's peace through control, there's peace through compromise, through I just want to please everybody, there's peace through withdrawal, I'm just going to isolate myself and, ostrich in the sand. Or there's peace through violence. I'm going to stand up and I'm going to take peace by the throat. And all of them avoid the real problem, which is the human heart. You see, we're not just talking about groups of people. We're talking about individuals. We're talking about you and I sitting here this morning. We're talking about the souls that are going up and down the roads around us. We're talking about the people in your community, the people in your circle of influence, your family. That's who we're talking about. They all have some form of peace that they are pursuing in some fashion or way. Yet, Jesus redefines everything about peace. He says, blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called the children of God. Peace is not trying to control people. Peace is not trying to keep everyone happy. Peace is not avoiding the conflict. Peace is not trying to overpower the enemy. Peace is actually reconciliation with God. And then helping others to be reconciled to God. This is why peacemakers are called the children of God. And my dad mentioned this last week. Is that the children of God represents identity. That God the Father desires peace in His world. And He was willing to send Jesus, His Son, to step into our chaotic world and become a living and breathing peacemaker, walking amongst us as humans. And the whole purpose of what Jesus did on this earth was to reconcile, was to bring back together a relationship that had been broken by sin. And instead of Jesus trying to maintain control and trying to please everybody and trying to isolate himself, he rather stepped in, and he didn't come with violence. He did not come with a sword. He came humbly, as a child, as a baby, a weak. When Herod the king was looking for this king of the Jews, at first he was looking for a man, somebody who was established. And then when he found out he was a child, he was like, well, let's just cut that off. There's no threat to me, yet he's still considered a threat. Peacemakers, which we are called to be, reflect the Father. And yet, as Jesus is walking through this teaching, he is communicating that when we step into becoming peacemakers and becoming the children of God, that this will produce persecution in our life. And you say, why? Verse 10, blessed are they which are persecuted for righteousness' sake. That phrase is so powerful, by the way, for righteousness' sake. Remember, the word righteousness is actually right relationship. So when we step in as peacemakers, we will be persecuted for righteousness' sake, for right relationship's sake. When we step in as peacemakers, more than not, we are going to be hurt. Think about this. When there is, and those of you who watch sports, we'll see, I don't know why, but for whatever reason, more and more, and maybe we're just more aware of it, more and more, like there's a brawl in the games, right? If you're watching basketball or football, or I enjoy watching baseball, like there's been some chaos in the past, but I feel like more and more, people are just like, yeah, we're ready for a fight. What happens in a brawl? If you've ever watched it, it's fun and horrible to watch at the same time. Okay, so I'm letting my honesty show through here, and you'll watch chaos ensue. The pitcher throws the ball a little too close to the guy at the bat at the plate, throw it a little too close to his head, and the batter, he gets upset. He flips down the bat and he begins to charge the mound. Right? And then the pitcher throws off his hat and he throws down his glove and he's like, yeah, let's go. And they begin to go after each other. They're running towards each other. And along comes a peacemaker. Right? What do they have to do in order to make peace in that moment? They have to step right in to the conflict, do they not? They're doing no good sitting on the bench. There's some guys that do that. Yeah. They're sitting on the bench. But the ones that truly are the peacemakers, they actually stand up and step into the chaos, the conflict, often holding one side, holding the other, saying, hey, no, whoa, think about what you're doing, boom, boom, boom. And every once in a while, a stray punch will land on the peacemaker. The one who is trying to make peace is the one that gets hurt in the process. Are we following? When we choose to become peacemakers in our world, you're going to upset somebody. Sometimes what happens is we become, that player steps in, becomes a peacemaker, and all of a sudden, the dude's no longer angry at the opponent. He's angry at this guy for stopping. Don't stop me. And the peacemaker is the one that is injured in the process of being the peacemaker. And what Jesus is saying to his followers on this mountain, and to the audience, the entire audience, made up of the spectrum of different individuals that are sitting in that space. He says, look, if you're going to become a peacemaker, it means that most likely you will be persecuted. Most likely you will be reviled. You will get hurt. Jude talks about, with all compassion, pulling those out of the fire. You know what happens when you reach into a fire? What happens? You get burnt. You get hurt. But it's pulling people out of chaos And we're willing to get burnt in order to save others. Peacemaking produces persecution. Persecution is the result of peacemaking because true peace exposes false peace. It confronts control. It disrupts compromise. It challenges isolation. It refuses violence. It refuses violence. It refuses violence. Jesus wasn't crucified for being gentle. Where did Jesus' peacemaking end him? On the cross. Making peace for everyone. He was crucified for confronting false peace with true peace. I think it's interesting that as Jesus is speaking here, verse number 3, blessed are the poor. Verse number 4, blessed are they. Verse number 5, blessed are the meek. Verse number 6, blessed are they. Verse number 7, blessed are the merciful. Verse number 8, blessed are the pure. Verse number 9, blessed are the peacemakers. Verse number 10, blessed are they. Verse number 11, blessed are ye. If you see the progression, it's almost like he's talking third person. This person is the blessed one. This person, they are. And then he narrows it down. He says, I'm really talking about you. Blessed are you. When men shall revile. You know what? You want to become a follower of me? You want to become a follower of the kingdom of heaven? Guess what? Blessed are you when you shall be reviled. When you shall be persecuted. When you shall have all manner of evil said against you for my sake. And that's where we understand that there is a true cost of true peace. Jesus would model peacemaking. He would be misunderstood. He would be represented. He would be treated unfairly. And yet he continued to show and continued to express peacemaking amongst humans. In the garden, at the point where he's about to face the suffering of the cross. In the garden, when he prays, not my will but thine be done. In the garden there, as Jesus is surrounded by a band of soldiers that is led by one of his own followers, Judas. And Peter stands up like a zealot. No! With his sword, and he strikes. And Jesus says what? Put away your sword, Peter. That's not how peace is made. Put it away. And he actually heals the individual that got struck with the sword. Before Pilate, he doesn't try to make this huge defense. He simply declares that he is the king of the Jews. He is the one who has come to save. He remains silent under accusation. And even on the cross, as Jesus was dying, he didn't retaliate. He said, Father, forgive them. This is what true peacemaking does. It actually absorbs the conflict. You know, the peacemaker between those two players, they don't all of a sudden start to retaliate because this person hit him, struck him in the process. No, they absorb the conflict. They absorb the pain, and they begin to push through truth and love, saying, bro, hey, you got to settle down. You got to calm down. Hey, watch what you're saying. Dude, look, no, stop. Hey, you got to think about what you're doing. Boom, hey, stop. No, okay, settle down. They absorb the conflict. And we transform the world through truth and love. Serge, I think I have a John verse up there. John 14, I believe it's 33. That's the one. John 14 verse first. Thank you. Yeah, there we go. So Jesus, in one of his last discourses to his disciples, he says, peace I leave with you. My peace I give unto you. What's the next phrase? Not as the world giveth. Do you see how Jesus was differentiating between the peace that everyone else was trying to create? And he was saying, no, this is my peace I give unto you. This give I unto you, let not your heart be troubled, neither let it be afraid. And then at the end of this same discourse, in chapter number 16, go ahead, Serge, he says, these things have I spoken unto you, that in me ye might have peace. In the world you shall have tribulation, which is another word for trouble. He says, look, I'm going to give you my peace, but the truth is you are going to have trouble as a result of my peace. I'm going to give you peace. In the world you're going to have trouble. But be of good cheer. I have overcome the world. This is Jesus again reiterating that He is the creator of all. He is bringing the kingdom of heaven to this earth to reclaim the world that He designed. Peacekeeping tries to settle, tries to appease. Peacemaking steps into the conflict. It makes things right. And it comes at any cost. It comes at reputation. Jesus later is described as having no reputation. All of us want a reputation. If we're truthful. Like, I want people to say, hey, that dude Aaron, he's a nice guy. He's a great guy. There's a little bit of pride in that, you realize? And Jesus stepped in saying, I want no reputation. He made Himself of no reputation. It comes at a cost of comfort. It comes at a cost at times of relationships. You know what? When you're trying to restore this one over here will be mad at you. If you're trying to restore this one over here will be mad at you. It will cost you relationships. It will cost you security or safety at certain points. If your peace never costs you anything, it's probably not Jesus' peace. Ugh, that's convicting. Jesus' declaration is so mind-blowing. Again, it's the upside-down kingdom. It's the reverse of what people would think. Blessed, Azre, are these people who are poor in spirit, who are mourning. And he says, blessed are ye when men shall revile you and persecute you and shall say all manner of evil against you falsely for my sake. What's verse 12 say? Rejoice. Rejoice and be exceeding glad, for great is your reward in heaven. For so persecuted they the prophets which were before you. Jesus is declaring that if you step into becoming a peacemaker, you will be persecuted, you will be reviled, and you're in good company. You're like the prophets from the past who are trying to maintain peace between God and His people in the midst of chaos and conflict, and many of them would suffer persecution. Some of them would suffer death at the hands of their own people. And Jesus, of course, is foretelling also of Him as the prophet that would come, that would be reviled, that His reputation and name would be destroyed, and that He would end up on a cross in sacrifice for the world that He came to make peace for. We'll finish with just turning over to Mark chapter 11, would you? Mark chapter 11. I just have some last thoughts here I wanted to share. As Jesus is sitting on this mountainside, and He's also looking forward to seeing how peacemaking for Him is going to end up. And He's calling others to follow Him in this peacemaking endeavor. He's reminding them and warning them that they will be persecuted, that they will be reviled. Today is Palm Sunday. And today we think about the week before Jesus' resurrection, and we want to focus on that, right? A lot. We focus next week. We're going to focus on, the life that Jesus has come to give. But a week prior to that, Jesus enters Jerusalem, the capital city of the nation of Israel at the time. And I want us to understand that Jesus didn't spend a whole lot of time in the Jerusalem area. Most of his ministry was in Galilee, which is where he's at in Matthew chapter 5. Most of his ministry is spent there with the outcasts of society, with those who would actually receive and hear the gospel of the kingdom, the good news of the kingdom. But towards the end of Jesus' ministry, he also ends up in Jerusalem. And as a Jew, this was a week-long, we call it Holy Week today. This was actually a week-long celebration of the nation of Israel celebrating their freedom from slavery in Egypt. And it was this week-long that ended with the Passover, the receiving of the Passover lamb, which is from the Old Testament story. We don't have time to look into that this morning. But this Jesus riding into Jerusalem on a donkey is this picture of a king that is riding into the city. And we see here in Mark chapter 11, I've got you there. Verse number 1, and when they came nigh to Jerusalem unto Bethphage, and Bethany at the Mount of Olives, he sendeth forth 2 of his disciples, and saith unto them, Go your way into the village over against you, and as soon as ye be entered into it, you shall find a colt tied, whereon never a man sat. Loose him and bring him. And if any man say unto you, Why do ye this? Say ye that the Lord hath need of him, and straightway he will send him hither. And they went their way, they found the colt tied by the door, without in a place where 2 ways met, and they loosed him. And certain of them that stood there said unto them, What do ye? Loosen the colt. And they said unto them, Even as Jesus had commanded. And they let them go. And they brought the colt to Jesus, and cast their garments on him. And he sat upon him. And many spread their garments in the way, and others cut down branches of the trees and strawed them in the way. The other gospel would mention that it was palm trees that are mentioned here. That's what we call this Palm Sunday. This is a day of celebration, of rejoicing as Jesus is entering into the city. And there was a crowd that was gathered there that day that was celebrating the arrival of Jesus. And they were crying out. They were crying out, verse number 9, and they went before, and they that followed cried, saying, Hosanna. And the word Hosanna means save us. Save us, King. And they were celebrating the arrival of this Jesus, and they had watched and seen and heard how Jesus exemplified peacemaking in their world, and they wanted this king to reign in their lives. They wanted this gospel, or this good news of the kingdom. And he says, Blessed is he that cometh, they say, Blessed is he that cometh in the name of the Lord. Blessed be the kingdom of our father David that cometh in the name of the Lord. Hosanna in the highest. And they are praising Jesus as he walks in. And then Jesus enters into Jerusalem, into the temple. And when he had looked round about all things, and now the eventide was come, he looked out unto Bethany with the 12. Skip down to verse number 15. So Jesus has just been celebrated as he's entered into the city. There's palm leaves. There's the clothes that are laying down. And this was common for a king or someone of great authority. If they entered into the city and the celebration, they would go out to meet the king. And there was this entourage that would welcome the king into the city. And there was this entourage that was here. And then in verse number 15, they come to Jerusalem, and Jesus went into the temple, and he began to cast out them that sold and bought in the temple, and overthrew the tables of the money changers, and the seats of them that sold doves, and would not suffer that any man should carry in a vessel through the temple. And he taught, saying unto them, Is it not written, My house shall be called of all nations the house of prayer? But ye have made it a den of thieves. And the scribes and chief priests heard it, and sought how they might destroy him. For they feared him, because all the people was astonished at his doctrine. All right, this is a strange portion of Scripture. I will agree with you. What in the world is happening in this passage? So Jesus comes into the city. There's a lot of people that are celebrating, yes, rejoicing of Jesus' arrival. Jesus then goes into the temple and begins to overturn tables. We'll come back to that in a sec. And then after that, the Pharisees and the scribes, we talked about them earlier, right? They didn't like what was going on. They wanted to destroy this Jesus. So do you see how on one side there were people rejoicing about Jesus entering the city? And then there's others who are resistant to Jesus entering the city. Do you see that? Do you see how Jesus is exemplifying being a peacemaker as he comes into the city? And on one hand, there's others like, yes, save us. Others are like, no, we don't want you. What exactly is taking place here? Why is Jesus so angry? This is one of those areas of scripture that I'm always, like, for the longest time, I was like so confused. And so like, this doesn't seem like Jesus at all. Like Jesus has been so kind, so gentle, so compassionate with people. And yet in this instance, it's like he had a fit. He's just overturning tables and like, what is going on here? And I want us to catch a glimpse, just a little bit of Jesus' heart when it comes to peacemaking, and maybe it'll help us understand what is taking place here. We know as Jesus enters the temple and he looks around, he sees the money changers. He sees the seats of them that sold doves. I just want to explain really quickly what money changers were. Okay, so when Jesus entered the temple and there were tables of money changers, these were those who were sitting at this seat that were exchanging currency that was allowed to be used in the temple. You see, the Roman denarii that was used everywhere else in the empire was not allowed to be used in the temple. And so those who would come and wanted to worship in the temple had to exchange their Roman denarii for the Jewish coin to be used in the temple. So that's why they were sitting there and having those exchanges. They also had this nice business setup, okay? There were those who were traveling in long distances. In the original setup, God had said, hey, bring certain sacrifices to the temple. Well, in order to make it easy for everyone, people wouldn't travel all the way with their sacrifices. They would come in and they would buy their sacrifice there. Well, they would exchange their money first. They would buy their sacrifice and then they go in and they would make their sacrifice and they would worship God in the temple. Here's what began happening though. Herod, the king of the Jews at the time, was the individual that set over the authority over the area of Judea, which is this whole area. And he answers to Rome. But he also was a man, he wanted to please the people. So he does this like full remodel on the temple of God at the time. And he wanted to make sure he pleased everybody. He wanted to please the religious council at the time, of course, is involved with the Sanhedrin, the Sadducees, and the Pharisees. Serge, will you pull up that picture there for me? So here's what had happened. During Herod's remodel, he had set up this temple, Herod's temple here, and he had set up this specific area for worship. It was called the court of Israel, which is the inner court. Do you see there's two different courts here? You have this outer court, and then you have this inner court. The inside was called the court of Israel. The outside was called the court of the Gentiles. So here's what had happened. The Jews at the time said, hey, we do not want the unclean Gentiles worshiping in the same space that we want to worship. So they can still be allowed, quote unquote, to worship with us, but they need to be out in this outer court where all of the money changing was happening, where the Jews were out there. And guess what happens when you have a bunch of money exchange? They were upcharging everyone, making money off of the Gentiles who were coming into worship. And also, think about what happens when you get a bunch of farm animals inside a worship area. Think about if we were trying to worship in here and we had cows, sheep, and all kinds of animals just running around here. It's going to smell like animals. They're going to leave their lovely gifts behind in this area. Jesus comes into this space and he begins turning over tables. And I want us to notice exactly what happens. So this court of the Gentiles, and there was this little gate that goes between the court of the Gentiles to the inner court of the Jews. And over the gate was this signage that was placed. Serge, do you have that? This sign that was placed, of course, you can understand that, right? That's Greek. No, you can't. So the next page will give us the interpretation. Over this was an inscription. that said no stranger. That means an outsider. That means an outcast. This language, stranger, is all throughout the Old Testament. You can do that word search. Go back and look at the word stranger throughout the scriptures. No stranger is to enter within the balustrade or the wall around the temple enclosure. Whoever is caught will be himself responsible for his ensuing death. So the declaration was made, hey, no Gentiles inside this inner court. You got to stay out with the filthy animals. That's where you're allowed to worship. And if you try to enter into that door, that gateway, you will be killed. Your life will be taken from you. Now I want us to look real closely at what Jesus' response was. Look at verse number 17. So we know that he has just overturned tables of the money changers. He's saying, hey, no, stop everything that's happening. And verse number 17, and he taught them. That's interesting language too. He taught them, saying unto them, is it not written? So we know Jesus is Jesus as the rabbi. He is quoting something, right? So he begins to say, hey, is it not written? What does he say? My house shall be called of what? Of what? What's the highlighted area there? Of all nations. He says, my house shall be called of all nations, the house of prayer. But you have made it a den of thieves. So where in the world is Jesus quoting from? Well, he's quoting from Isaiah chapter 56. You got that, sir? Let's flip there real quick. Isaiah 56. I think you have to see this. You have to see, why is Jesus so angry? That's the question I asked myself when I approached this passage. I was like, why in the world is Jesus so angry? I've never seen him so upset before in his entire ministry. Why is Jesus angry? Look at Isaiah 56 and verse number 1. Thus saith the Lord, Yahweh, keep ye judgment and do justice, for my salvation is near to come, and my righteousness to be revealed. Interesting. His righteousness is to be revealed. His salvation is near to come. I wonder what that's talking about. Verse number 2, blessed is the man. I wonder what that Hebrew word is. Oh, could it possibly be the word Azrei, which translates into the Greek Makarios that we've been looking at for the last several weeks? Blessed is the man that doeth this, and the Son of Man that layeth hold on it, that keepeth the Sabbath from polluting it, and keepeth his hand from doing any evil. Verse number 3, neither let the son of the stranger, the son of the who? The stranger. This is the Gentiles. This is the outcasts. He says, neither let the son of the stranger that hath joined himself to the Lord speak, saying, the Lord hath utterly separated me from his people. What is God saying here? He's like, look, I don't want anybody to ever say that they are separate from the people of God, the Jews. He said, I never want any son of the stranger, any individual that is an outsider, quote unquote, to ever say they were separated from the Jews. The Lord hath, he says, let them not say that the Lord hath utterly separated me from his people. Neither let the eunuch say, behold, I am a dry tree, for thus saith the Lord unto the eunuchs that keep my Sabbath, and choose the things that please me, and take hold of my covenant or my promises, even unto them. Who's he talking about? He's talking about the outsider. He's talking about the son of the stranger. He's talking about the eunuchs. These are individuals that were outside the covenant of Israel. The Jews themselves looked at these individuals as very disgusting. And Jesus says, I don't even want them to think that they're outside, that they're separated. Verse number 5, even unto them will I give in mine house and within my walls a place and a name better than of sons and daughters. I will give them an everlasting name that shall not be cut off. Do you see the heart of God here? Do you see how Jesus is, as he's coming on the scene, he is filling full what God the Father, for what Yahweh God had intended from the very beginning. You know what God said to Abraham? "In these shall all the nations of the earth be blessed." Not just the Jews. He said, no, in you, all the nations of the earth will be blessed. He said, this good news, this salvation is for all. And I don't want anyone to say, hey, I'm an outsider of this. No. Look at verse number 6. "Also, the sons of the stranger that join themselves to the Lord to serve him and to love the name of the Lord, to be his servants, everyone that keepeth the Sabbath from polluting it and taketh hold of my covenant, even them will I bring to my holy mountain and make them joyful in my house of prayer." That's familiar language. "Their burnt offerings and their sacrifice shall be accepted upon mine altar. For mine house," here's the phrase that Jesus is directly quoting from, "for mine house shall be called an house of prayer for" who? All people. You know why Jesus was so angry? Here's what had happened. The nation of Israel had said, you know what? The good news and the gospel is just for us. And it's not for these filthy people. And we're going to put a sign on the door that says they cannot come in. They got to worship out there with the animals. And Jesus was angered by that. Jesus righteously steps in and says, no, that cannot happen. That was not my intention. My heart and my love was for all people, not just for you. I'm going to quote Isaiah 56, which specifically says that my house was to be called a house of prayer for all people, for all nations. If you've made it into a den of thieves, you're taking people's money within my house, which was meant for a place of worship for all people. Jesus, I believe, begins to flip those over, saying, no, come in. You can worship here. Come in. No, stop all that. Come in. And you know what happened after this act of Jesus? The Pharisees and scribes begin to plot to kill him. They said, we don't want this type of individual coming and bringing this type of peace in our nation. He's causing an uproar. He's bringing people together. We cannot have that happen. We got to put a stop to him. And Jesus went to the cross. Paul references this in Ephesians. Serge, you got that verse? Sorry, I'm a little excited here. Paul says that at that time, ye were without. Who is Paul writing to here as the Ephesian church? This is like 50, 60 years later. He's writing to Gentiles, non-Jews. He says that at that time you were without Christ, being aliens or strangers from the commonwealth of Israel and strangers from the covenants of promise, having no hope and without God in the world. But now in Christ Jesus, ye who were sometimes afar off are made nigh by the blood of Christ. For he is our peace. Do you see that language? He's the peacemaker. He is our peace, who hath made both one, and hath broken down the wall of partition between us. What do you think Paul is talking about there? Oh, he's talking about that wall in the temple. He's saying Jesus has come through and broken down that wall of partition between us. We all are in desperate need of the good news and the gospel of the kingdom. So let us ask ourselves this question this morning. Are you and I willing to follow in the steps of Jesus? In opposition to the religious of the day? In opposition to the Sadducees who just wanted to appease, and even in opposition to the zealots of the day? We could call them the nationalists of the day. It's a little sensitive, right? What if Jesus is calling to us to rise above all of that and say, no, we're to become peacemakers of the gospel of the kingdom. And I'm willing to do that at any cost to my reputation, my name, my safety. because his house was to be called a house of prayer of all nations. Let's stand. I'm done this morning, but I just want us to analyze ourselves this morning. When you think of peace, what are you thinking of? Are you thinking of what Jesus is thinking of? You see, Palm Sunday today, that welcoming of Jesus into the city, reminds us that as a peacemaker steps into the city, that exposes the heart of everyone who comes in contact with this peacemaker, Jesus. Some rejoiced. Some laid down their cloaks, crying out for salvation, because they were ready to receive the kind of peace that he brought, one that was humble, one that was reconciling, one that was rooted in surrender to God. Others grew angry and threatened because his peace confronted their control, their compromise, their isolation, and their desire for power. The same king produced worship in some and hostility in others. And that is the point. When you embrace Jesus' kind of peace, you step into that same tension. You may be called a child of God, but you will also face resistance from a world that prefers a different kind of peace. The triumphal entry was not just a celebration. It was the beginning of the road to the cross, proving that true peacemaking does not avoid conflict, but it walks straight through it to bring reconciliation to humans. Let us pray.